All right, testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. See if the mic is working.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
See if my mic is doing it.
Sound is good.
All right, we good. All right, let's open up in a word of prayer. Brother Jamar, can you please open us up?
Dear Lord, thanks for allowing us tonight just to have this chance to first off fellowship and eat together. And just thank you as we go through your word, you'll bless this time of discussion, of learning, of just you bless this time with your spirit, Lord. In the name of your son, Jesus, amen.
Amen. All right, so let's get into it. We've been going through the prophets. And so we started with the prophet Isaiah, and prophet Isaiah was just so creative in how he brought the word. A lot of it seemed like a grand performance with him and God, right? And we talked a lot about how, in some ways, it was almost like a rap song where Isaiah would just be, throwing these lines out, and then God would just be on the track, right? Other times, God was the whole track, and Isaiah would sometimes throw in a bridge. And then Jeremiah is a little bit different in the feeling that you got this feeling of you are doing reality TV with the prophet. You get to see in his mind how things are going. You get to see prophecies from his perspective. We got to see his call. We got to see his different approaches. And we haven't truly hit the meat of his different approaches yet, but we're still getting there. And so we're going to get into chapter 10, just with this kind of understanding that it's a little bit of a different flavor than Isaiah, but at the same time, Jeremiah is a very gifted person, right? He's very gifted. The way he crafts the message, we makes us feel like we're in his mind. Whereas Isaiah is always painting these pictures, right? So Isaiah is painting these beautiful pictures with words. He's an artist. And Jeremiah is like, you get into the mind of the prophet. And so just imagine as we go through chapter 10, what the prophet wants us to see. And that is, he wants us to understand the mind of the prophet, right? And not just the mind of the prophet. I guess that's incorrect. He wants us to see from the prophet's perspective, but he wants us to understand the mind of God truly. Right? He wants us to understand God's word. So let's read chapter 10. And, we've been trying to breaking out of the habit of if somebody just reading the whole chapter. So we're going to read chapter 10, break it up in this little section. So let's read the whole chapter, but one person doesn't have to feel the need to read it. Just read a chunk, then somebody else will continue.
Hear the word of the Lord speaks to you. Hear the word of the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel, says the Lord. Learn not the ways of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of craftsmen. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. The idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil. Neither is it to them to do good. There is none like you, O Lord. You are great, and your name is great in might. Who will not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your due. For among all the wise ones of the nations, and in all their kingdoms, there is none like you. They are both stupid and foolish. The construction of idols is but wood. Beaten silver is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. They are the work of craftsmen and of the hand of the goldsmith. Their clothing is violet and purple. They are the work of skilled men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and everlasting King. At his wrath the earthquakes, and the nations cannot endure his indignation.
Thus shall you say to them, the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. It is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by understanding stretched out the heavens. When he utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens, and he makes the mist rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain, and he brings forth the wind from the storehouses. Every man is stupid and without knowledge. Every goldsmith is put to shame by his idols, for his images are false, and there is no breath in them. They are worthless, a work of delusion. At the time their punishment they shall perish. Not like these is he who is the portion of Jacob, for he is the one who formed all things, and Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name.
And 17, gather up your bundle from the ground, O you who dwell under siege. For thus says the Lord, behold, I am slinging out the inhabitants of the land at this time, and I will bring distress on them, that they may feel it. Woe is me because of my hurt. My wound is grievous. But I said, truly, this is an affliction, and I must bear it. My tent is destroyed, and all my cords are broken. My children have gone from me, and they are not. There was no one to spread my tent again and to set up my curtains. For the shepherds are stupid and do not inquire of the Lord. Therefore they have not prospered, and all their flock is scattered. A voice, a rumor, behold, it comes. A great commotion out of the north country to make the cities of Judah a desolation, a lair of jackals. I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not in man who walks to direct his steps. Correct me, O Lord, but in justice, not in your anger, lest you bring me to nothing. Pour out your wrath on the nations that know you not, and all the peoples that call not on your name, for they have devoured Jacob. They have devoured him and consumed him, and have laid waste his habitation.
All right. So let's just look at this passage, and we'll start at the beginning, and then we'll kind of do a review looking at the shape of the passage. Okay. So we'll first start off with this. He wants us to kind of hear God's voice in the beginning. He says, hear the word of the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. So we got this thing going where the Lord speaks to the prophet, but he speaks to the prophet for the sake of the people, right? And so the prophet is sitting there. He's just a conveyor of God's thoughts. So in their mind, right, the prophet is like God to them, because the prophet speaks the words of God. At least that's how he should be respected. To disrespect the prophet in that way is, in a sense, to disrespect God. And it's not that the man is so high, it's just that he's an instrument. It'd be no different than if God was speaking through this microphone and you slapped this microphone. You're not disrespecting the microphone, you're disrespecting God. You know, you slap a drink out of a man's hand, you ain't disrespecting the glass, you disrespecting the man. So we have to kind of look at this, and this is going to add to the weight of later prophecies, because Jeremiah is going to start to have a personal conflict with the people. But let's just start off with this idea that the prophet is hearing God's voice. And so verse 1-5, God is speaking. What's he saying? So let's just engage in that real quick. Don't want to dominate the whole conversation. So what is God saying in the first 5 verses? Who is speaking?
Starting at 2, it says that thus says the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Just talking about not following idols of the other people. You know, just learn not the way of the nations. Because most people are vanity. They work with an axe and hands of craft. They're so that they build their own idols. You know, their idols like scarecrows. This warning of worshiping idols.
Mm-hmm.
He's given a very step-by-step process of how these nations around them are getting their idols, and their backstories are so easily weak of how they're serving their gods, that they're able to give God, these gods or these idols, this reverence, but they just built it like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So they put all the effort, all the time into it, and then they act like this is the being that created them. This is the being that's blessing them with all their whatever. It's like, you just made this yesterday. How can you possibly give this thing so much respect?
Mhm.
They created God who in turn created them.
Yes.
So go ahead, brother
What I'm
John.
kind of getting out of this is like God is basically saying, okay, look at all these other nations. They're basically worshiping a corpse. And I am a living being who created everything, so why aren't you worshiping me?
Mm-hmm. Look at the beginning and the end of these verses real quick. He said, learn not the way of these nations, and in the end, don't be afraid of them. They cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. Don't learn the way of the nations. Let's just think about it, because I was thinking about it in this sense. Why in this passage, right? The Bible knew that we would read this, right? God knew that we would read this. How come it doesn't mention atheism? Right? How come it doesn't mention Buddhism? How come it doesn't mention all these other religions? If you think about it, there's so many different religions. So why is it just mentioning idol worship? And so I just thought about that. And then as I thought about it, I started to realize every religion is idolatry if it's not worshiping God. Because every religion is self-created. And it's no different than if you just made you cut down a tree, built it up, put some metal on it, and say, hey, here's God. Because that's what you do, right? So if you're an atheist and you might have somebody and his name might be Nietzsche, right? And he might sit there and he might make a philosophy. He just made it up. Right? He just made it up. And he comes to you with this thing and he says, hey, worship this. Good idea. But he just came up with this. Why is it so convincing to you when he just made it up? Hey, this dude, he's super smart, living in a cave. What's his name? Socrates. Let's worship what he worshiped. Now, is Socrates a genius? Yes, he is. But why are we worshiping him or his ideas? Let's even get more controversial. Islam. It didn't exist in the 5th century. It didn't exist in the 6th century. It's all of a sudden created in the 7th or 8th century. Why are we worshiping this God? He just got made up yesterday in the grand scheme of history, right? Where did he come from? Where is his origin? His origin is in the mind of men. All idols, in a sense, we may say to ourselves that idols are physical objects. But that's not what God is saying. His stress is the way of the nations. Don't be dismayed at the signs of heavens. Then do not be afraid of them. They cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. It's the impact of the heart that decides if an idol is being created. Now, I've heard lots of different idols and even strange idols as I talk to people. I heard somebody tell me the black woman is God. I heard somebody else tell the black man is God. Which if he or she is, our communities wouldn't be in the states that they are. Heard some people saying the white man is God. Heard other people saying the white woman is God. They don't appear to be gods to me. I heard lots of different gods mentioned. And then some gods are just implicit. Science has become a god. Right? Science is truth. Is science really truth? Is that even what science is? Like, if you think science is truth, you don't really understand what science is. Because is science truth, or is science a way of trying to understand the world to get closer to truth? Doesn't science advance when you disprove what other people thought science was?
Exactly what happens.
So science is not truth. Science is, this is my best guess today. It's not truth. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's bad. Just like if I go to work and I say, I think this guy likes me. No, I think he hates me. It's just my best guess today. I still got to work within that framework of this is all I got to go with. And as we observe more things, sure, science is good. It gets us to some kind of approximation of truth, but it only is as good as your measurements that you take. Somebody says, yeah, there's a gravitational constant. What is it? Well, it's like 9.8 point something, 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 right? And you sit there and you think about this gravitational constant, but where'd you get it from? You measured it on a scale.
That they made up.
Yeah. And the scale might be accurate, but somebody had to set a scale.
Mm-hmm.
What's a pound? Somewhere, somebody has created an object of unit that they call a pound. Is a pound a real thing? No, it actually is really not. It's just a unit of measurement. Somebody had to make up even what a unit of measurement is. And somebody's pound might be 1.0000001 pounds. And somebody's pound is 0.9999997 pounds. And at the end of the day, we're going to say, oh, well, they both a pound. But which one is a true pound? Can science tell us that? It cannot. It can't tell you that. And that doesn't mean that it's false. It just means it can't tell you truth. It can give you an approximate understanding of things. As best as you can guess today. The smartest man in the world can look at the world and say, I guess this is what it is. Right?
That's crazy. But it's true.
So it's not giving you an objective truth or an absolute truth, as some people would say. What is truth? People say, well, what is truth? There is no truth. If there is no truth, that's contradictory, because that will mean that will be a truth, right? So, yeah, so there has to be truth, right? There is truth. We know there's truth. Everybody accepts there's truth. If you don't accept there's truth, you wouldn't be a scientist, right? If you don't accept there's truth, you wouldn't guess people's intentions, right? You wouldn't do certain things. There are facts. So we all understand that there's this high level of this thing that maybe we don't think that we can accomplish getting there, but we all know that there is a truth. And we all privately know, even if we don't want to admit it, we all privately know that on our own, we can't get there. Here's how I know that. Because everybody goes to school and reads books. What does that tell you? We don't tell our kids, hey, just sit down and figure it out. Figure out math, okay? Figure out language, okay? No, we say smart men and women from the past have figured this out. Don't be an idiot. Spell this word the same way they did. Don't be like a rapper and spell ladies with Z. No.
Spell it the same way they did.
Spell it the same way they did, right? We got a language is the way it's supposed to be spelled. They figured this out. Do this. Hey, this is this theorem. This is this math way. This is how you solve this equation. Do this. Then after you figured out the basics, what everybody else learned, then you could jump on that. If you're smart enough, you could build on their shoulders and build something new. Or you could aim at taking down their shoulders. Whatever way you want to do it, you still had to learn what they did first. We don't even treat you seriously unless you've done that. Nobody says, I'm just going to sit down and figure out the world by myself. Nobody.
They try.
The funny thing about science, if you think about it, they always try to think about it in an atheist way. But really, science is a study for trying to figure out how God did what he did.
Yeah.
And it just made me think of whenever you see somebody do something that's like a level of mastery, everybody tries to figure out how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't like a level of mastery, but it made me think of when Michael Jackson did the Smooth Criminal thing where he did the lean. Everybody was trying to figure out how he did that lean.
Mm-hmm.
And people were like doing mathematical formulas and trying to figure out what he did to do that. And nobody really realized it until he finally released the patent after he died. Like, this is what I did. This is how I figured it out. But everybody is pursuing what this man who mastered that did.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to figure out, how did he do that? Science is really like, man, how did God make that happen? How did God make a water cycle? How did God make an atom? How did God make this stuff? They're trying to figure out how God did what he did. And really, there's not going to be an end game of that, because just like we're trying to learn about God and learn more about him and get closer to him, there's not going to be a pinnacle of that.
Yep.
You're always going to be learning more. I think even in heaven, we're probably going to realize like that's how this worked on earth because God did this.
Yep. And here's the thing: we search ultimately for the one who created truth to reveal truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want that, and even a scientist does that, right? Because he says, if I pursue truth hard enough, it will be revealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he says. Now, he may not acknowledge God, or maybe some of them do, right? Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. Right? The same with a social scientist. Same with anything. Some of these things God has already answered, but people may want to study it or whatever. It's not a bad thing to study and say, man, you know what? What is the suicide rate amongst homosexual people? What's the suicide rate amongst transgender people? Now, I already know that it's going to be higher because I know that if you live a lifestyle that's against God's ways, it's going to produce in you a rejection of yourself. I already know that if you have to have something like a Pride Day, that means that you want everybody else to be happy for you. You have now made your happiness outside of yourself, which means you can't make you happy, which necessarily means you're going to be sadder than other people. I already know that. I already know if somebody tell me, hey, you got to say Black Lives Matter. I already know that they questioning themselves. Maybe my life doesn't matter. I already know that. But it's good to have studies to prove that, right? It's good. But in itself, that still doesn't prove anything. We got studies that show all kind of stuff. Some stuff is smart, some stuff is not. It all depends on how you construct the study. We even have polls, right? And some people say, I don't believe that poll. Why? Because the poll was conducted in a silly way, right? You sample people. You can't poll everybody, right? You can't ask everybody in Milwaukee, how you going to vote? You don't have enough time to do that. So you poll 1,000 people. And you say, I think the city got 12% this many people and 30% Black people. And then you just measure it out and you hope you're right. And then they say the poll is right within a 6 or 7% error.
What?
You're like, that's pretty big. That's pretty big. That's a big margin of error. Best we can do. I give you that. It might be the best you can do. But ultimately what it tells us is truth is not found in the minds of men.
Without getting too far down the rabbit hole again, Ryan, I'm just thinking about one of the first times that kind of truthfulness has to do with time. How God created the earth to have seasons from the get-go, and how man started off by just measuring this distance from the sun and the stars, something that God gave us naturally right away to sort of get a better measurement of time. And now we have, this idea of how many days are within a year, how many days within this season, okay, how many hours within a day. It sort of helped us build on that whole concept of, God first giving us this planet. We have day, we have night. Okay, how long does it take to go from one thing to another? What do we do within these spans of times? How long do we need to sleep in order to best be used to cultivate the land? So all of these things that God gave us initially, that He did reveal the truth that we have day and night and seasons. Okay, now let's find out how to measure that. So it's what?
It's even months.
Even months. So yeah, we just kept on building on that truth to have something that is more universally agreed upon by pretty much everyone on the planet. That we all agree that there's day and night and there's a certain amount of time within a year.
And even that is imperfect, right? Because we still got to have leap days, right? We still got to adjust the year, because if we didn't put that one day in every 4 years, our year will be off, right? Because a year is actually 365.25 days, right? If we didn't adjust it that one day every 4, right? There's been history of people who didn't have that leap year, and then their history got swayed like 4 months, right? And they were sitting there like, man, it's January, why is it hot? It's because your months are off, right? Right? When they first created the Gregorian calendar, that's what happened.
But that's a good example, too, of how people do ignore God in those, because we've done it for so long. We've kept these clocks and calendars, and we forget that God established it. So it's like, yeah, look what we did. We're so organized. We've held this together for thousands of years. No, we didn't. We didn't even make this up.
We still going by, and this is the crazy thing. We got all these advances. We still got a 7-day week. We still got a 7-day week. Where'd that come from? Where'd that come from?
You said it says they cannot do evil and nor is it them to do good. The first thing that comes to my mind, not necessarily exactly what this passage is, just lukewarm, and you're gonna waver. What is it built on? You're built on sand, basically. You're gonna waver.
Mhm.
And that's just with our minds, our concepts. What
Mhm.
people may say, it's gonna change and shift. So then, where are you really basing anything on? It changes.
Yes.
It's gonna always change, and
Yep.
especially what we see nowadays. People are making up their own things, and other people are following it. It's gonna lead to chaos over there.
It
But
already is.
So
Yeah.
many terms got changed
Sad.
in the dictionaries. Like, why are we changing definitions? They're supposed to be definite.
Yes.
You have to go back and change definitions. They're probably doing something wrong.
Yep.
I know. I seen a video on TikTok, basically like talking about this one guy, and like instead of like saying follow God, he's saying follow him.
Who's dude?
Well, I mean like it's Greenville, Ohio. Like it was described as a cult.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing this and I'm just like, okay, this guy's definitely like trying to push God out of the picture and like trying to put himself in that place.
It really makes me laugh how many things people come up with nowadays, like it's something new. Like none of this is new.
Mhm.
But someone will swear that they're like, how come no one's talking about this? I'm sorry, man. Here I go again.
Mhm.
We should be continuing with the passage. I'm sorry. We talk about this later, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's
It shows
good.
that people, no matter what it is, they want to follow something, but they don't want to follow the obvious truth. With all the different obvious truths out here of established rules in nature, it shows you that somebody had to set up these rules of nature, which is science. So somebody above us had to do something like that. So obviously there's a God out there,
Mhm.
but they don't want to follow this God because it's not to my liking, not to my taste. So let me make up something of my own want to follow, and let me just make that my God.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's sad if mankind keep doing that because they're destroying themselves ultimately. Because they're also making these gods, these idols, to do stuff that will also lead to their destruction.
Mhm.
So most of these things lead to sex cults or sex deviancy or drug deviancy or something like that, basically destroying them in the end. While follow God, it's going to lead you to a life that is long lasting.
Mhm.
It's like, that's just, well, Satan ultimately destroyed everybody, but it's sad.
But let's think about too where this passage starts with. It starts with God speaking, right? So God speaks on idols, right? God speaks. So then there's a section in the middle, right? Right after that, verse 6, the prophet is speaking, right? So then he says, he's like marveling. And this is the thing you have to get from this, because Jeremiah likes to mix layers in. You have to look at verse 6 through 10. First thing you want to do is read it through and just read it through, pretend that it's a worship song, okay? But then the other thing you want to do is read it with an element of sarcasm, and then read it with an element of rebuke, right? And if you read it in those tones, you'll kind of be like, man, Jeremiah, you really is like hitting us on multiple layers here. You're right. Verse 6 could be the start of a psalm, right? There's none like you, God. You are great, and your name is great in might. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? Now, it's interesting because he says the nations. And I know a Jew would sit there and say to themselves, man, we don't be worshiping idols like that. Look at all these. But he's saying, no, it's you. It's you. And here's the other thing is, all these nations worship idols, but what does he call God? King of the nations. He don't call him just King of Israel or King of Judah. King of the nations. King of a people who don't accept his rule. This is your due. For among all the wise ones of the nations and in all their kingdoms, there's none like you. Now, there's something interesting that he's saying here, because, and I think it kind of goes with what we've been saying a little bit, and that is he contrasts God. And when you look at the term wise ones, there's two ways to look at it, and I think he means them both at the same time. One is he could be looking at their gods, right? But the other thing he could be looking at is their great minds. And if you think about it, a lot of time when you contrast people with great minds, they get worshipped. We even see this in the Christian community. And I'll just give you an example. I turn on Facebook, and this is one dude who always on Facebook all the time. I don't think he's y'all friend, but he's my friend. And all he does is put up stuff that Calvin says. Now, is John Calvin a good dude? I believe he's a very good dude. He's not a god. He's a Christian thinker, preacher. You might even call him a prophet. But he preached good things to help us understand the truth. But if we quote Calvin more than we quote the Bible, I think there's something wrong with that, right? Same with Martin Luther. Martin Luther, very good guy. Not right about everything, but right about a lot of things. But you sit there and you look at Martin Luther, you say, this is a good dude. Augustine, great mind, good dude. Lots of good people who taught the word. John Piper, living today, good dude. Right? I can mention other people did in this day and age. D.A. Carson, Keller, all kind of people, good guys. But don't worship them as gods. Don't respect them as if they're more than men. When they wake up, they got to take a shower too. Right? They're no different than me and you. And they may have great minds or great gifts that God gave them. But at the end of the day, they still limited by what God gave them and the restrictions that men have. And someday they're going to die, just like me and you going to be dying one day. And what we need to do is take the lessons from the guys, but don't worship the guys. Because then they start to become rivals with God. Go ahead.
I was just struggling with this maybe like 6 months ago. So I rededicated my life like maybe 12 years ago. On fire, if you want to say. But the on fire was really just spending time with God in my worship, meditating, pray, just listening. And then after a while there, after Lisa came, 3-year-old right now, I started listening to people that I listen to, right, to learn. And I had skipped out more on my time of worshiping God, thinking about God. And I just felt empty still, right? You listen to all this stuff, all these other people, the whole day, right?
Yeah.
But then you're really skipping out on the source.
Yeah.
And you're not in the right frame of mind. You're still you're missing. And like my mentor was like, yeah, how much time you still spending? Is it an hour or two? I'm like, oh no, it's about 25 minutes. But it was just different for me, right? Because I was cutting out intentionally without me realizing it. I was like, well, I just do this. I'll learn from them. But then you're cutting out the source.
Yep. Yep. And that's so true. And then it's like too, we can go into deep study. And I always
and you're not like reading the Bible. Right?
Yeah.
Listen to all these people, you ain't reading the Bible. You're cutting out on that too.
Yeah. But I even think if you read the Bible, you can get in danger. And the point I was making was sometimes I'm angry at some pastors because what they'll do is they'll study the Bible and their mentality is just leave me alone. If I could just meditate on the Bible, I could reach some deep level that you'll never get to. But where does God want us to ultimately do our worship? It's in the church. And you don't go to church alone. In other words, we understand God more fully when we understand him together. Right? Church attendance, so important, right? Worshiping together, so important. It's something about, here's the thing that's weird about it. There's something that we learn about God more when somebody who's next to us can't sing. Somebody else next to us sings better than us. Somebody up there leading us is not perfect. Somebody else in the doing the sound, and maybe they make a mistake. Somebody else is doing a great job. Various people paying attention, not paying attention. There's something that we learn more about God. All of that going on that God intends us to all see. Right? Some people even say things like, man, I will go to church, but this person treated me wrong. How do you know God didn't want him to treat you wrong? And I'm not saying that he accepts that person's sin. My point is, could not God be teaching you something about that person's wrong? Like, why is that out of bounds? Right? Somebody addressed you the wrong way. What'd you learn from it? I learned you're a jerk. Wait a second. Can you learn something more than that? Could it be you put your expectation, or you said to yourself, I'm not going to have a right attitude unless everybody treat me perfectly? Could it be that's a false thought? Could it be that your expectation that if God doesn't do everything perfect, you ain't going to worship him? Could that be spoiled brat theology? Is that no different than the person who says, if I don't get this money, God, if I don't get if I don't get all my Christmas presents, I ain't gonna worship you no more. Well, who's God then? Right? Ultimately. But there's a lot of things to wrestle with. Man, I go and I teach a real good lesson, and it look like people bored. Somebody sleeping in class. Right? What do I have to learn from that? What do I got to learn from that? God is telling me something, and it's not necessarily just to wake the person up. Right? So it's something about that. Maybe it could be, you know what? You're not that important as you think you are. Right? You're not as important as you think you are. You're not as riveting as you think you are. If so-and-so can fall asleep while you teach, maybe that's a problem. Right? That could be a lesson. It could be a lesson. Hey, you got to accept. You could be teaching a great lesson, and if somebody don't come with the right heart, they can't receive it. That could be the lesson. It could be a number of lessons, but ultimately God is teaching me something, and he wanted it to happen. Otherwise, it would not have happened. Right?
There's a pastor at the church I used to go to. There's a person that had continuously fallen asleep. I mean, just knocked out and causing disturbance, right? With loudness. The pastor was like, "Why is he falling asleep all the time? You always come here just to fall asleep. Why don't you just go home?" Come to find out that the person was going through an array of things, and he felt safest and most comfortable at the church.
Yeah.
So he not about God too much, but he knew he was going to go to church. And long story short, it took a couple of years, but he ended up learning more and then accepted the Lord in Jesus Christ. But it started off as like, why are you falling asleep all the time? Why are you here? I mean, honestly, right?
Yep.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So of course there was boundaries with that, right? In the order, like,
Yep.
you could do, like, okay, you can't make that much noise, or let's do this way. Maybe just sit over there. But not to just like jump to every kind of conclusion. Even though it's frustrating. You teach on a whole word, and someone just straight up just falling asleep.
Yes, that's
Come to
frustrating.
find out that was like his safe spot.
Yep. Yep. So it says these guys, there's this thing that happens, and I want you to see this. Look at verse 6 through 10, and look at kind of the form of this. Just think of it as more of like a structure of art, right? And then look at verse 11 through 16. And see if you see the similarities between the two sections, and just point them out to me if you can. All right, so 6 through 10 as one section, 11 through 16 as the other. What do you see as similarities in the two? Right, because then the next question going to be is why are there similarities between the two? But what similarities do you see?
Stupid.
There is a stupid comment, right?
Yeah.
Where's the stupid comment in the first section? Is in verse 8. And in the second section,
14.
Verse 14. The first section starts off with how great God is, right? But it's shorter. But it does mention how great God is. It's meant to inspire. But then look at 12 and 13. It's a little bit longer. But it gives us these great images like God is crafting the rain. Like almost like he's sitting there with a hammer, right? Making raindrops. You say, man, how's God making rain? And you said, then he made lightning to go with it. It's like, what? God made lightning? Yeah, he did. Where'd it come from if it didn't come from him? So it's like, man, he's making all these things. He utters his voice. There's a tumult of the waters in the heavens. He makes the mist rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain. He brings forth the wind from his storehouses. Right? We think a tornado, and that's just, he said, man, that's just a penny out of my storehouse, right? I got lots of tornadoes in there. I got hurricanes in there. I got typhoons in there. Whatever kind of storm you want, it's in there. Right? He got it all in there, all grades, all levels. You sitting there saying, man, God, how great are you? Things that can knock a state on its side, right? Look at Florida, right? Things that can knock a state on its side, make a civilization go upside down, could bring down civilizations, right? Certain weather events could bring down a whole civilization. So you talking about all that, and God like, that's just in my storehouse. That's not in my real house. That's just in my house. I don't really go in right there. Right? That's my garage. That's my little shed back there. That's my tornado shed. I got all kind of tornadoes in there. I don't even use them all the time. Right? So then after this mention, he gets into stupid and foolish, right? And let's just look at that as a almost like a form of an argument, right? God is so great. If you observe just regular creation, you will see how great he is. So how stupid can we be to not see that, right? Then put to shame. Look at verse 14 and look at verse 18. They are stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Right? Instruction of idols just but wood. Verse 14. Every goldsmith is put to shame by his idols, for his images are false. There's no breath in them. Verse 16, it ends, not like these is he who is the portion of Jacob, for he's the one who formed all things. Verse 10, but the Lord is a true God. He's the living God and everlasting King. At his wrath, the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure his indignation. This idea, I think there's a couple things that he is talking about here. The first thing is the things that the idols are made out of, God gave. The things that you say the idols have power over, God has. If you want to look at an idol and you call them Baal, ultimately Baal was the monster, the master of storms. But God is the one who crafts raindrops and makes lightning and has storehouses with tornadoes in them. That's God. Ultimately, you say, oh, I'm going to dress him up in these clothes. I'm going to put purple clothes on him. But this is the true king. The reason why God is insulted, it kind of reminds me this artist. Me and my brother love this artist. Okay. This artist's name is Twitter Picasso. Twitter Picasso will draw a picture of you and make you look so bad. That's what he do. That's all he do. He go up on picture and he say, hey, I drew a picture of you. Doesn't it look great? And it'll be somebody famous and it looks so bad. Like it's just a mockery of them. It's just a mockery, right? He'll draw a picture of somebody, like, and he'll just make their head, like if they got a big head, when he draw their head, it's like it's a blimp behind them, right? And he just make it, and he act like, but he on his thing, he always use serious words and act like he really doing some great art, but it's always just mocking the person, right? Let's think of this as God is looking at your idol as a Twitter Picasso account, right? He's sitting there saying, are you saying that's me? That can't be. You drew me like that? No, that can't. No. Are you serious? Jesus, are you? That can't be. No, that's what they did, God. They saying that's you. That can't. That they know. No. Do they know who I am? They drew me like that? No. So then, after you get this right, so you get this structure, this double repeated structure that goes in the middle of the passage, right? It's repeating and it's making this argument. Why is it twice? Is a question that we got to ask ourselves. And I don't know if I fully got the answer to that. But I guess what we could say is the importance of it is such. And I think if you wanted to study this passage real deeply and deeper than we can, you could look at 11 through 16 and verse 6 through 10. And you could look at those sections as amplifying each other, right?
Well, I was going to say maybe it's repeated too, because isn't the first time the prophet's saying and then God is saying is like, and tell them this and add this in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're right. Tell the people and also remind them that I did this too.
Yep.
You know, because the first one, the prophet is speaking, right? 6 through 10, isn't
Yep.
that? And then the next part says, thus you shall say to them. So isn't the next part God speaking?
Yep. That is a good point. That's a good point. So yeah, you're right. It does amplify, and it's the prophet. But here's another way of saying it is the prophet and God's words align, because the prophet is a true prophet because he speaks what God wants him to say. So then, and I like this because whenever you preach a good sermon, you should therefore have some kind of application for the people, right? And so verse 17 starts it off. He said, hey, get your rags, right? Get your little rags together. Because the Lord's slinging you out of here, right? He throwing you up out of here. And then verse 19, the prophet starts speaking. He said, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. This is so bad. It's almost like I fell and I can't get up. It's like a tent fell. The nation is a tent and I can't put it back together. It fell and nobody's helping me put it back up. For the shepherds are stupid. They do not inquire the Lord. Who are the shepherds? That's the leaders, right? The leaders don't inquire the Lord. They know that God is judging them, but they refuse to go to God to rectify their problem. It kind of reminds me a lot of our educational system, right? We don't want to allow God in the schools. Then the schools, and I think we should use this term because maybe it will help people understand. The schools going to hell, right? And then we don't look at God who's sitting there saying, yeah, I destroyed your schools. Oh, you want somebody to fix them? Why don't you look at me? Nope. Let's go deeper down. Oh, let's have 25 genders. Instead of science class, let's have who are you class. We have all these things and say, wait a second. This is what God will have us do. Confuse our kids on their most basic thing that they were born. I always thought it was a good thing to be proud of who God made you to be. Whether you're tall, short, fat, thin, black, white, beautiful, ugly, God made you who you are. And you crafted that way. And you should be proud of that. And part of that description should be male, female. But we have taken people's ability and said, no, you really shouldn't be proud of that. You should try to figure out if you should change it. When I got married, when I thought about getting married to my wife, the thing that I loved about it was a big question of life had been answered. I don't have to ask again, right? Mm-hmm. But we have taken a question that most people shouldn't even have to ask and make them ask it. So what have we done to the young mind? Right? Have we thought about that you unsettled them? What if you just told somebody, hey, your mama who you love, yeah, you've been loving her your whole life. She's secretly feeding you poison. How would that mess with a young mind? How's that any different than saying, hey, you've been a boy? Think about whether that might be bad. You should be a girl. How's that any different?
You could be a number of things. How do you feel you are?
I've never thought about it. Wow, now I'm questioning that. And they say, that's good, you should question that. No, it's not good. That's not good.
One day wanted to be a helicopter.
Yeah.
There's 6.
I was driving today and I was just thinking, like, we have made life so much harder than it needs to be.
Wait.
God answered so many questions before you've been born. So He made you as a boy or girl. That means ultimately you should want to pursue the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. So then your whole internal being of who you are as male or female, and then who you should pursue as a mate is already answered. Mm-hmm. But once we decide that you can be able to pursue your same sex, that's things got a little twisted. Mm-hmm. And then now that led to the door of, well, that didn't work, so let's try to change our whole physical body as well to be able to maybe then we'll line up better with our opposite sex.
Yep, and it all started with inappropriate understanding of gender expression, right? Because there's a few things. One is people got offended by the idea that something could be more male or more female. Right? I'm a woman still. And to be honest, you were a woman still, but that doesn't mean there's some things that you might do that might be more masculine and some things that might be more feminine. No different than me. I think I'm a real man, but I think my love of the arts might be more feminine than masculine. Me lifting weights is more masculine than feminine. There's lots of things. Nobody should just be just straight up, just everything I do is masculine. That's not a real person, right? Nobody is. Very rare is somebody gonna be like that, right?
Not a happy person.
Not a happy person. You're right. Not a happy person or a person most people want to be around, right? So we all a mix of these things, but ultimately, on the sum of it, a man should be more masculine, right? And a woman should be more feminine. That's just how it is. And you may have some interests that go along the other way. That just makes you unique as a person, that you're not cookie cutter. But at the end of the day, you should still express yourself in masculine and feminine ways. People always say, well, what if I was called to be a prophet and I'm a woman? What am I supposed to do? You express your gift in a feminine way, which means you're going to express it differently than a man would have had the same gift, and that's okay. But guess what that does? It simplifies things. It makes you understand what you should do. It gives you a bounds and since simple. And this is the thing. I looked at it this way. I saw the Packers had lost, right? And after they had lost, they said, man, maybe we should think about simplifying the offense. And ultimately, the answer to them was not necessarily making the offense more simple. A lot of people have said, but just learning it better so it seems more simple. Either way, the solution to be good at anything is to make it simple.
Wait, that sentence you just said. What was that again? You said learn it better so that it seems more simple.
Yeah.
Instead of folks trying to overthink things so much to become our own philosophers.
Yes.
Of things. Like we just like the whole male-female thing. We've been overthinking it so much instead of what you're saying, like there being a blend. Some people have blends here, blends there.
Yeah.
Even if you are anatomically a man or anatomically a woman, you may have a blend internally of, okay, I like this better than that, or I might enjoy this differently than that.
Yeah.
But essentially, at its core, to have a better understanding of it, a man is a man, a woman is a woman.
Yes.
But when we try to overthink and overcomplicate things, then that's what we do with all this other extra stuff.
Yeah, that would actually be a really good question for somebody who thinks they're transgender. Like, I really think I'm a man, I think I'm a woman. Like, when you play a video game, you first start off, you're like, you know what? I'm going to be a magic user. You play it for 5 minutes. I don't want to be a magic user anymore. How about you master that first and see if you're actually good at it?
Yes.
Maybe you should be a magic user, but you don't know because you only did it for 5 minutes. So have you mastered being a woman yet? Do you really know what being a woman is before you say, oh, that ain't for me? Master it first.
The thing about it is what we have done is we've justified insanity, right? Because somebody will say to themselves, I always knew I was a woman. But how did you know that? Because you never was one. So that's your fantasy. That's a fantasy. And what you have done, and here's the thing, the thing that's scary about it is, and we may laugh at it, but it's a sense of delusion that becomes arrogant. And let me tell you, I've seen people on Twitter saying stuff about men and women because they transgender, they think they understand some deep thing now. Listen, no matter how you change from a man to a woman, you will never understand how it feels to have your first time in a month. You will never know what it feels like to be able to be pregnant. You will never know what it feels like to have that possibility. You will never know those things. Just the same as if you're a woman going into a man, you will never understand some things that men just take for granted because you're just born that way. You'll never understand how a man is wired. They had one lady who tried to transition to be a man said, I just never understood how most people view me with suspicion and how men, don't touch each other enough and this and that. And we need to improve that. No, we don't need to improve that. You need to accept the fact that you are a woman trying to be in a man's body and you don't understand that us men don't need that.
She wanted to become a man first and then start touching men? What?
She still wanted affection from other men.
Oh.
She wanted hugs and stuff like that.
So she thought this would be more like brotherly affection?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And she was having a problem with that.
I thought she wanted to be a gay man.
Some people do that. Some people do that. Isn't that what's his name? Jenner did or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. He went and then became a lesbian, which makes no sense. But anyways. Yeah. But I think that's why a lot of people do it. They want the attention. So then he says after this, a voice, a rumor, behold it comes, a great commotion out of the north country to make the cities of Judah a desolation. Then the prophet becomes introspective. And this is a part where it's really deep. And Melissa had mentioned this part. And it's a kind of verse that maybe you should think about a couple of times and try to think about if you could figure out what it means. Because it's hard for me. But he says, I know, O Lord, that the way of a man is not in himself. Now that's interesting. That's very interesting because he is preaching, and this is the thing. This is absolute scripture, so this is true, right? We have to wrestle with how this is true. How can this be true? This is true in the sense that we are either slaves of sin or slaves of righteousness, right? We do things that we may not want to do. You ever had a person try to stop cussing? Can they stop? They can't stop. They can't stop. Tell a person, hey, just stop lusting. They can't just turn that off. They could try, but they can't. It's part of them. So he says, I know the way of man is not himself. It is not man who directs his steps. So, God, please save me. If I'm to be saved, it must be a force outside of myself. Because if I was counting on me to do something differently, I would have already have been different. Right?
Mm.
If I had it in me to be different, I'd be different. That's why everybody who say, oh, I'm just going to meditate by myself and study and be different. Is that true? Oh, I need to lose weight. I've been overweight for life. Are you getting any help with that? No, I'm just going to do it on my own. You got yourself into this weight. Don't you think you may need some help to get out of there? I'm just going to manifest it. And try harder. Try harder. So then after that, the prophet does another troubling thing. He gets introspective. And I think I like it, but too, the prophet says, correct me, Lord, right? The prophet is saying, man, Lord, your judgment is so fierce. Help me, Lord, not fall under it. What is a good place to be, right? That's a humble place. Even though we know the prophet is a holy man, he still looks at the judgment of God and says, I'm not perfect, God. Work with me. But then after he says that, he turns and takes another turn that most modern Christians don't. Pour out your wrath. He prays for God's judgment. And that's a hard prayer. That's a hard prayer. That's a heavy prayer. But it is one that the prophet makes. We got to ask ourselves, at what point do you have to be ready to be praying that prayer yourself? Lord, pour out your wrath. Because ultimately, we could try to resist it as much as we want, but God is going to judge. He will judge. So pray for his mercy. But, we always say pray for his will. If he going to judge, pray for his will. If he going to show mercy, pray for his will. But pray for what his will is. Right? That's it. Any comments or questions as we get ready to end here?
I was sort of looking at how it had reiterated the word, I think every man is stupid. And that oftentimes we'll say, like, it's not just stupidity, it's ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I was just sort of looking at how that reflects on what it says in Romans about how they don't have any excuse. These are people who have seen God's judgment, who they have seen the evidence of God being real, and yet they still have left God and turned to idols, which is not ignorance anymore, that's just stupidity. So it's not like they don't have the proof in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just looking at that, and I was like, I forget exactly who it was, but someone did argue the fact that to call people stupid is not. We shouldn't call people stupid, we should call them foolish.
Mm-hmm.
Because stupid isn't in the Bible. Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's in there 3 times, right, in this chapter. Let's think about it this way, too. If you look at the biblical picture of evil, it's never just ignorance. It's always willful. And let's look at the worst offenders. Satan. Does Satan know who God is and how glorious he is and how good he is? Yes, he do. Judas. Does Judas know who God is? Yes, he does. Judas saw all the miracles. Right? Balaam literally was told by God, I'm not going to curse the people. So he tried to trick God into cursing the people. Right? The Pharisees knew Jesus raised a man from the dead and said, hey, let's kill that guy too. The worst people, Pharaoh, right? Saw the plagues, saw what God was going to do, still says harden his heart. The worst forms of evil are not people who are just sitting there and ignorant, even though that can be a form of evil. the worst kinds of evil, ultimately people know. Right? Romans says, even though they knew the law of God, they encouraged people, they broke it and they encouraged other people to break it. They knew, right? People know. I think that's what makes it hard when we go out there and we witness. We need to witness to people, but ultimately when we witness to them, we got to recognize that the law of God could be in them and they might know, right? And call on that. All right, let's close up in a word of prayer. Brother Aaron, can you close us in a word of prayer?
Dear Lord, we thank you for your word. We thank you just for the guidance that you give us through that, Lord. We ask God that you slide our path for us. Help us not to just follow idols, whether it be ones of our creation, the creation of someone else, Lord. Help us to follow you and only you. That we can give you the glory in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Sorry. I didn't know the door was squeaking.
Right.
Well,
You're talking about like how